Good afternoon. This is my daily brief, a little lunchtime brief. Yesterday, I talked about why to be useful. Use the kind of the absurd scenario of the zombie apocalypse because I think that there's one of those scenarios that you can kind of visualize and say, hey, here's a situation that all of a sudden gets dropped in on you, and everybody has to work together as a team. And as you're either going to be useful as being a team member, or you're going to be useful by attracting the zombies to keep them away from that rest of the team, right? I'm trying to say, find ways of being part of that team. Don't just be the guy left behind for the zombies to munch on. Let's look at this in a little bit more realistic way. Natural disasters, right? We're moving into tornado season. A few months after that, we're going to move into hurricane season. We've all dealt with this. Maybe not all of us dealt with this in one way or another. But maybe you're in a FEMA region and you're going to get a FEMA region that gets hit by hurricanes a lot. Maybe you're in a very earthquake-prone place. Maybe you're in Tornado Alley. And you're looking how to be useful. Now, usefulness, being useful, is also prior planning, right? You have to anticipate what's needed and be able to execute on those things. And you have to learn how to be useful in a few different ways, because maybe the one way that you're useful, maybe there's already 10 people that are already useful doing that, and they don't need any more help doing that, right? In the hurricane or a tornado situation, right? Communications. I'm a big ham radio advocate. Get your radios up and running and so forth, and get your weekly practice in, and understand the fundamentals, at least understand how to set up a radio, set up the antenna, how to power it, and so on and so forth. Communications will always be the focal point, because you're going to have to, how are you going to set up communications between you and like the state FEMA office that's 200 miles away? That's a significant challenge, to be honest with you. And if you don't have satellite communications, it's hard to communicate 200 miles away. It's easy to communicate 2,000 miles away, and it's easy to communicate 20 miles away, but it's very hard to communicate 20 miles or 200 miles away, right? How are you going to do that? Do you have the skill set to set up that Invis antenna and start getting into communications out, right? And do you understand the solar cycle and the time of day and how that may impact communications? If so, you're going to be very useful, right? Because an event like this, a natural disaster, a tornado comes in and wipes down a town like Greensburg or like Joplin or whatever. The National Guard units will eventually come in with their TACSAT systems and set up the satellite communications to the state FEMA office and all this stuff. But that might be 12 hours out. That may be 48 hours out. Who knows, right? Maybe their TACSAT system was in that town that got hit by a tornado, and now they have to get one from across the state and set that up. And then that means they have to activate the guards people, and they have to get their shit together. They have to get the generators and the fuel and the food for a week, and then yada, yada, yada. And that just takes time, right? They don't have these trucks standing by typically. Everything's put away in inventory and so forth. So all this a package has to be created, a detail needs to be made, and they get to get there, right? Maybe you can be the person that is there automatically and helping set up communications, even if it's nothing more than setting up local communications. Maybe you have an extra ham radio, you get the ham radio in your car, and you set up a little repeater, and you're like, okay, here's a couple of handheld radios, a whole bunch of cheap Bofang radios. And we're going to start looking for people, right? We'll make sure, get accountability of everybody in the town and see what the damage is. But those handheld radios, they're good for a line of sight, but maybe because of the situation, they're not communicating well. You can set up a repeater real quick, operate that repeater, and help and facilitate with that. And you're also going to be the facilitator for communications. And then you can set up more communications for those that short range, or that I would say short range, but within the 200-mile area, right? So you guys start setting that up, because cell towers are knocked out, other radio repeaters are knocked out. So you're relying completely off of your skills and abilities to bounce a signal off of the atmosphere to come pretty much straight back down. so you can communicate with the state headquarters, the FEMA office, or whatever. That's one way of being useful, and I use that example because I think it's a great example that how somebody could be immediately useful in a situation. Because your emergency managers will think about comms, but do they practice it? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? A lot of times your emergency managers also rely on ham radio folks to come in and be a part of that package. Town gets leveled by a tornado. Hey, we need a couple of ham radio operators to help us set up antennas and a couple of radios so we can communicate outside the sphere of influence of that tornado. Be that useful guy. Knowing logistics and how to, what needs to happen, what needs to be picked up, right? You're going to need things like toilet paper and blankets and food and water, or ways of cleaning water. You're going to need alternate sources of cooking this food. Maybe the gas lines have been disrupted. Power's going to probably most certainly be out. You're going to need to know that you can cook on a grill, right? Another very notable skill to always have, and that's everyday skill, is know how to cook. I'm not talking about how to throw ramen in the microwave, because you can't use a microwave. The power's out. You need to be able to take raw materials and make something, even if it's nothing more than, your tat crackers, and whatever, which is nothing more than grease and flour powder, mashed together and, fried to make a cracker, right? Not the best thing in the world, but you now have people on the ground trying to extricate people out of buildings and so on and so forth. They need to eat, and they're not going to have time to source their own water, source their own food, and pull that stuff out. Maybe you don't know how to cook. Maybe you don't have, how to operate radios and so forth. You need to be strong then. You need to be one of the people that can go out there and be part of that response package, looking for people, getting accountability of the people, and unfortunately, maybe dragging people that have passed away in the event out of those facilities or out of those buildings, so everybody's accounted for, right? And that comes into physical strength and endurance, right? So if the one thing that you can do to be useful is just to be strong, do that, right? Another thing about being useful is that sometimes people conflate being useful with what they like to do, right? This has nothing to do with what you like to do. Now, it does help that if you enjoy cooking, you enjoy camping, and so you know how to cook outdoors. If you enjoy radios and the technology that way, but it doesn't necessarily, mean that you should only focus on the things you like to do. Focus on the things that you can be good at, right? Learn a skill and learn that skill. Spend a couple months at least getting to a certain competency level with that skill, and then learn and practice that skill a few times a year at least, just to maintain your proficiency. Doesn't mean that you love doing it, but you have to learn how to be useful. And when situations like a natural disaster arise, nobody's asking you what you want to do. They're going to tell you what needs to be done, right? They're going to have a list of things that need to be done, everything from logistics. We need to source materials like toilet paper and blankets and food and water. And we need to source, the bags for making sandbags. And we need to source the sand. We need to source the vehicles to pick up the bags and pick up the sand and dump them all in one location to make sandbags. So the logistical part of this is probably 75% of the battle, right? Are you useful in any regard? Can you, and being useful could be just nothing more than knowing local people I know somebody that's got a large truck. Let me go find him, see if I can get his truck. I know where there's a stockpile of these sandbags. It's down at whatever shop, and they've got 15 pallets in the back for whatever reason. Great, go get them. Start putting together a sandbag filling station, right? Using sawhorses, road cones, and big piles of sand, big piles of bags, and a shovel, right? Start putting that together, right? And start helping manage that process, because you're gonna have somebody that's going to be in charge of all of this, right? But they're not going to be directly in charge. They're like, hey, radio operator, I want you to tune to this frequency and make sure your antenna's this many feet off the ground, and we need to do that. They're just going to say, I need you to set up comms to the state. Can you do that? Yeah, roger that. I need you to cook. We have 30 teams, and each team is comprised of 2 to 5 people out there searching for people. They're going to need food. I need people to get in there and cook. Can you do that? You should be able to go, Roger that. I can cook. I need medical personnel that can at least evaluate wounds, help manage people, and so on and so forth. Maybe I need somebody to go around and look for shoes, because in a tornado, people need shoes. That's one of the things that people forget to put in their tornado kits, I think. Shoes and toilet paper, right? You need shoes because a tornado is going to spread glass and nails and splinters and everything under the sun in the little tiny pieces all around the area. And a tornado is not going to hit when you're dressed and ready for it. It's going to hit at like 11 o'clock at night after you've just gone to bed in your underwear, right? And the next thing you know, you're rushing to the basement and you're like, oh, crap, I'm in my underwear. You need people to find shoes and bring them, have those ideas of understanding what needs to happen and what needs to make people safe. Anyways, long story short, yesterday was kind of a scenario dropping you and saying, can you do anything useful, and to go through a self-evaluation. Today is assuming that you maybe have done a little bit of self-evaluation, and now I want you to look at why you would have to be useful. So let's look at real life examples of this. We're getting ready to head into tornado season here in the Tornado Alley area. And a couple months from that, we'll be heading into hurricane season. It's been earthquake season all over the world lately. So, we don't know, a lot of these huge earthquakes, thankfully, have been under the ocean, but it doesn't mean that it will stay that way. You have to learn how to not just protect yourself and then protect your family. Those are maybe your primary responsibilities initially. Protect yourself, protect your family, get them safe. But then after that, are you just going to be somebody around sucking other people's resources, or are you going to be somebody that's going to be participating in getting problems solved, right? And problem solved could be anything from communications to logistics to just strong people picking up heavy things, right? This is your evaluation task for today, is evaluate whether or not, or how you can be useful, and try to be useful in many different ways, right? Because maybe they don't need a radio operator right now. They've got 2 other people, but make sure they say, hey, I know how to do this stuff too. Just keep me on tap in case somebody needs relief, right? And you need, somebody else to come in and man the radios for a while. Maybe you know how to cook. Maybe you know how to clean water and lots of it relatively quickly, and not relying on the grid, the electrical grid, the natural gas grid, and so forth. You can source, you're going to go out and look for ways of cooking, maybe go to a store that is local and get a whole bunch of bags of charcoal, and maybe even, some way of making a grill, or finding a whole bunch of grills and then start preparing food, right? Usefulness isn't so much about hard skills. I mean, you definitely need to have these skills to follow up. It's also about your your way of thinking and the way you mentally prepare for situations. Being useful also means that you think about scenarios and situations like this, and you run through checklists and like, okay, tornado season, what do we do? All right, you're going to make sure you have bags that's going to have, a change of clothes, maybe an MRE or one of those, hot water meals. You're going to have shoes or something to put on your feet. You're going to have a roll of toilet paper, because toilet paper is probably the single most overlooked thing in disasters. Everybody kind of clumps together in one small area, and that one small area might only have 2 toilets, and they only had 1 roll of toilet paper anyways, how bad do you want to hold it for a couple of days, right? So bring a roll of toilet paper. So think about the things ahead of time. Think about things like, the most realistic scenarios that you'd be put in, and then maybe escalate those scenarios that maybe a big earthquake collapses a bridge and it knocks out, it's going to knock out communications potentially, because a lot of communications line are conduits along the bridges. It may stop traffic going through the city so you have to go all the way around the city. And maybe there's some way you can be useful in that, if nothing more than just keeping off the roads. Maybe you can help set up a communications network so people can monitor the situation all around there with people on the ground. You got your radio in your car and you're sitting there giving updates every 15 minutes. Anyways, I want you to think of being useful as just being a prepared mind, and this isn't just for these big things like tornadoes and hurricanes and other natural disasters. Things can happen in your own life, right? You're out in the middle of nowhere. You're driving back from grandma's house and it's like 10 o'clock at night and your car breaks down for whatever reason and you're stranded and it's relatively you're in a place with no cell phone service. And you're not stocked in your car. Well, one of the things that maybe you should have thought about is like, anytime I'm further away from my house than I want to walk, I should have something to spend the night in my car with and make it comfortable. If it's winter, you'll need a couple blankets. If it's summer, you'll want some water. You want some water anyways. This mentally preparedness state will help you also always be useful. Don't think of useful as just the skills that you have right now. Think about the skills that you can build, and it might just, it might not be things that terribly interest you, but that doesn't matter. Where are the ways that you can be useful, and do you have the skills to get useful in that? I didn't ask if you're interested in it. Having an interest does help. It's not a requirement though. Because I guarantee if the only skill you have is lifting heavy objects, the one thing that you might be the most useful to the total group is dragging bodies out of rubble, right? And not live bodies. So if you want to be more useful than dragging the bodies out of the rubble, then start thinking about this, right? So if that thought disturbs you, you're like, well, I don't really want to be put in that situation. If I don't have to, though I accept that that may be the most useful way I can participate in saving people. But how else can I be useful? I can do things. I can do hard things. I can take care of the masses. I can prepare all the food or prepare all the water for people that are going to be pulling bodies out of the rubble. I can help set up, cleaning stations and showers and whatnot for the people that have been out all day dealing with the mess. Anyways, that's my lunchtime brief for the day. So if you have any comments, questions, please leave them down below. If you want to me to maybe expound on other topics, also leave them down below in the comments. And if you would, just go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I'll try to put these daily briefings out more consistently. I don't know about every day, but I'll try to make them a few times a week. And I'll try to keep them under 15 to 25 minutes. Anyways, have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you next time.